Welcome to Interview Connections. We're the first ever podcast booking agency. I'm Jessica Rhodes, the founder. And 12 years ago in 2013, I started booking my dad as a guest on podcasts because I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And fast forward to today, we're a multi-seven-figure agency. We've worked with over 800 clients. We've booked more than 30,000 podcast interviews. And this podcast is all of our top lessons from the last 12 years, booking entrepreneurs on podcasts, scaling our company to be multi-seven figures a year, distilled down into bite-sized topics and episodes to help you learn from us. I co-host this show with Interview Connections co-owner and CEO, Margy. And without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how to know if podcast guesting is for you or not. And I think this surprises people because they expect that since podcast guesting is what we do and what we sell, that we're going to say it's for everybody and everyone should do it. But we don't say that because it's not. And there are people that we turn away who want to become clients. And for a number of reasons, it's not a fit. And we know that they're not going to get the results that they're looking for. And we tell them that honestly. Yeah, we have consultation calls every single day. And I always tell people on those calls, like, the purpose of this call is to, number one, let's make sure podcast guesting is the right marketing strategy. And if it is, we'll talk about our service. But if it's not, I'll send them on their way. It's truly, an opportunity to see if it's the right fit for you. So hopefully this podcast episode will help you know if it's the right fit. Okay. First, I'm going to start with these are reasons it would not be a fit for you. And that way, if you hear yourself in this, you could just turn off this episode and you don't have to listen to the whole thing. So it's not for you. Number one, if you don't have a vehicle to monetize small to mid-sized podcast audiences. So sometimes people will say, I want to be a podcast guest because I have a really interesting story. I have a great story and people need to hear it. And it's like, that's great and probably true. But first of all, that doesn't give us a lot of clarity on what shows you'd be a good fit on. And hosts don't generally like it when you're like, I could talk about anything, because that's a lot of work on them and they don't know you. So they're like not going to come up with ideas for you. The other thing, though, is you don't, again, have a vehicle to monetize. So if you're just like, I have a great story and I want to talk about it, that's great. The clients that we work with, though, are entrepreneurs. And so they're guesting on podcasts. Yes, they want to share their story and have an impact, but they also have a vehicle to monetize. They have a business, some type of offering that their podcast guesting is funneling people into. Yeah. And I think an obvious caveat here is, like, if you want to go be interviewed on podcasts, live your life, like, go get interviewed. But we're talking to business owners, people that want to use podcast guesting to effectively and intentionally grow a brand and get consistently booked on podcasts. So I just want to make that disclaimer because, you might be like, well, I can still be. Yes, you can. But this is, the point of this show is to help you, like, grow your business with podcast guesting. So if you don't have something to monetize, it might not be the best use of your time. Yes, exactly. And occasionally we do have people who have sold businesses and had like insane exits, and they just want to share their story to give value to other entrepreneurs who are earlier on and they have money and time to invest in this and they just want to do it. And that's wonderful. But if you have, like, if you're like, I want to make money from my story because I have a great story, but you don't have anything set up to monetize it, you're probably not going to be a great fit for us. And we're probably not going to be able to get you to your goal. If your market is too small, so that's the second thing. If you have a really, really niche audience, and we do work with some pretty niche clients, especially if they can go on a number of different types of shows. But if you're like, I want to only be on podcasts for restaurant managers. Here are some real examples from sales calls. I only want to target restaurant managers and podcasts for restaurant managers, chiefs of police, or I want to target an audience who is 80 and above, right? A pretty elderly audience. These are demographics that are pretty niche and not super well represented in podcasting. There's just not a ton of podcasts that are just for restaurant managers or just for chiefs of police. So is there a podcast here or there?
Probably, and that's maybe a situation where you'd wanna reach out to them yourself because there's not a ton of them, but for us, we're booking our clients on at least 30 shows a year, and so when we sign up a client, we wanna make sure that there are enough shows that are a fit for what you're looking for and for your goals and target audience that it's gonna, move the needle for you.
Yeah, and it also depends on what your goals are for podcast guesting. Like, say, for example, you do have a really niche audience, like your clientele is in an industry that is sort of like sometimes when I talk to prospective clients about who their target market is, I'm like, how many people have that position, right? Maybe it's like a CEO of a specific type of business. I'm like, you could probably count the number of people that have that role, right? But that doesn't mean podcast guesting won't work for you because maybe you want to do podcasts to build up your SEO and you could go on lots of different podcasts where your clients might not be listening, but you're getting the backlinks, you're getting content that then you can repurpose and promote to your email list where you do have that target audience listening. So if you have a very niche audience, if you're wanting to do podcast guesting to build your brand, to build your SEO and create content, it can still be good for you. But if you're like, no, I just want to get clients, and I need every show to have a lot of people who are my ideal client, that's when it might not be the right fit.
Yeah, and that's a great point. For all of these examples of people that it's not a fit for, it could still be a fit for you depending on your goals, like Jess is saying. If you have a goal for SEO, if you're building up your personal brand, then podcast guesting would be great for you. But we would just want to have a conversation to make sure that your goals are in alignment and you're not expecting to only be booked on shows that are for restaurant managers. Like, we just want to get aligned there. If you need really high volume of leads, our strategy is probably not for you. So if you sell an app and you need like hundreds of thousands of users because they're paying $10 a month or $10 a year, this is probably not the strategy for you. We primarily work with entrepreneurs who are relatively high ticket. And so these mid-size audiences of ideal clients are incredible because a handful of clients from a show is 10, 20, $100,000 plus ROI in their company. So if you are selling something that requires really high volume, you're going to need to be in front of huge audiences. That's not impossible. There are really big podcasts out there that you could get on. We don't focus on that strategy. We have booked people on really big shows when it was a fit, but that is not what we market ourselves at as, and those aren't the promises that we make to clients. If you do want to get on really big shows, also really important to keep in mind the same way that you're like, I want to be on a huge show, those shows are trying to grow as well. So they want guests who are going to bring a huge audience too. So if you want to get on huge shows because you need volume, you want to be thinking about like, what am I bringing to the table that's going to appeal to this host? If you are targeting a local customer base, that is not a good fit for podcast guesting. So if you are someone who I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I work with clients in a brick and mortar, and I'm looking to be on podcasts where the listeners live in Georgia. Like, we get questions like that all the time. It's not a stupid question because you can do that with like meta ads and stuff. You can target certain areas. Podcast guesting is not like that. It's very hard to know where the audience of a show is. They're global. So, usually, even a US based podcast is going to have listeners not only all over the US, but probably all over the world. And so if it's a really, really important for you to target a really specific location, then podcast guesting is not going to be a great fit. We have had people with brick and mortar businesses who work with only local clientele have success with podcast guesting. And it comes back again to what Jess was talking about. Their goal was SEO and building up their brand. And so even though they knew that probably the audience of the show wasn't going to come be a client because, they're on the other side of the country, having it on their website, having local clients find their podcast interviews and listen to them was worth it for them. Fiction novels. This is something we get kind of a lot. People who've written self-published fiction books and want to get on podcasts. Not a bad idea. I think this is a good example, though, where you probably would want to pitch and book yourself. And this comes back to if your goal is book sales, that's going to be pretty low ticket because maybe $10 a book. is a good
Mhm.
estimate. And so if you're going on small mid-range podcasts and you don't have a high ticket offering, you're going to have to sell a lot of books for $10 to make it worth your time. And again, really high volume would need to be a really big podcast. And if you're relatively unknown, self-publishing a book pretty early on, it's unlikely that those hosts are going to see interviewing you as an opportunity to grow their show.
Yeah, and you wanna be getting booked on podcast like, if you're having somebody else book you on podcasts, you want that person to have connections in the industries and the types of shows that you wanna be a guest on. We've always been super transparent. We don't work with fiction authors. We don't book on podcasts that are interviewing fiction book authors. I would guess there are lots out there because there's 3 to 4 million podcasts, and there are, niche podcasts for anything that people are passionate about, and my goodness, like, book talk, like, people are very passionate about fiction books, but it's just not a category of the podcast world that we've got any experience with. So, yeah, we can't advise fiction authors. And again, it's like just what Margie said. If you're looking to really generate a lot of money through book sales, you need to be on some fairly good sized podcasts.
All right. This is a little bit of a controversial one, but we have seen this happen enough times that I think it's worth mentioning. We have had people who apply to be clients with us and they had a social media presence, they had a public social media page that was unprofessional, um, where they were posting a lot of stuff that we knew would cause hosts because when we pitch you to a host, they're going to check you out online. And they were posting things that we knew that hosts were going to see that and say, nope. Um, and so it's totally your choice what you want to post online, of course. But keep in mind, if you want to be booked on podcasts, if you want opportunities, people are going to be looking at your social media and you will be limiting your opportunities if you're posting things that are going to upset people. So, something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think this is a good time to remind everyone that what tweet, retweet, I don't know what they're called now that it's called X, but like those are all public. Like I think people really smash that repost button, not realizing that people can see that. And this also goes for comments. Maybe you're not posting it on your page, but you're commenting on other pages. People can see what you comment. So learn to have a filter, consciously think like, if a podcast host that I want to be interviewed by sees this, would they still want to align with me and my brand? And if you're like, I'm fine losing the opportunity because I want to get my voice heard on this topic, that is totally your call. But there is a risk to commenting and talking and posting about things that could be controversial or divisive.
And then the last thing is if you don't, so we talked about kind of having a social media presence that's unprofessional or very polarizing. And then the other thing is having no social media presence or no website. There needs to be some type of place where hosts can see who you are. If you are impossible to find on the internet, it's a really hard sell because podcasts are an online platform. Most of the hosts are online business owners. And so really the main rule is like you should have a website. There are exceptions to that because there are very successful entrepreneurs who do not have a website, who use landing pages, or who have really big social media followings on some platform. And that is really where they're doing business. And that's fine, right? If you don't have a website, but you have 100,000 Instagram followers and that's working really well for you, that's great because that's a place that hosts can go. They can go to your Instagram, they can see who you are and what you're all about, but you need some type of presence. If you don't have a big social media following, that's totally fine, not a requirement at all, but you should have a website. You should have some type of presence so that when our agents pitch you to a host, your name will be hyperlinked. The host, the first thing they're going to do, maybe look at the one sheet first, they're going to click that hyperlink and look at your website or your social media, whatever is your main place, and they're going to go through it to figure out what you're all about and make sure that you're in alignment with the show. So if you have no online presence whatsoever, we probably can't book you. And that's something that you would want to get up and running and then start guesting.
Yeah. I was interviewed on a podcast, the Digital Dominance podcast. The host name is Jeff Rowe. He's a fantastic website designer. So if you need a website, we've had many clients work with him and they're absolutely thrilled with the work. Full transparency, we have a referral agreement. So we do get a little commission if you go work with him, but we only refer our clients and our audience to people who have done a fantastic job that have done, really well. So you can go listen to my podcast interview on his show. And then if you do need a website, again, we've had clients be very, very happy with his service. So let's talk about now that you know who podcast guesting is not a good fit for, or, questionable, may not be a good fit. Let's talk about who podcast guesting is a home run marketing strategy for. So, number one, if you are an entrepreneur and you close more sales when your leads understand the strategy behind the service that you offer, this is a great fit for you because you have this opportunity in a long form context to educate new audiences on your expertise and the strategy and what you do. So I'll give you an example. One of our clients is a construction accountant. So he's got a lot of competitors because there's a million accountants out there, but he's industry specific, right? He works with construction business owners. So by educating on podcasts about, like, one of his interview topics on his one sheet is like, what is a construction accountant? Why would I work with a construction accountant over a general CPA? And this has worked really, really well. One of the podcast hosts that we connected him with ended up bringing him to be a keynote speaker at his in-person conference, like a room full of construction business owners. He got so many clients. So educate people around the strategy of what you do, and they will see the value in your service so much more than if you're just, not educating. Number two, you need your clients to know, like, and trust you before they invest. So this is truly applicable to the vast majority of services out there, whether you're coaching, providing a financial advising type of service, have investment opportunities in your real estate company, whether you're a service provider, B2B. Your clients need to know, like, and trust you. If they don't trust you, they don't know you very well, they don't like you, it's going to be much more difficult for them to want to work with you. This is why we do podcast interviews. This is why we have this podcast. We know that our ideal clients, our dream clients, the clients that we absolutely love, they like us a lot. They trust our judgment, they take our advice, and that comes from being visible and speaking on podcasts and showcasing our personality through a conversational format like podcasting. Number three, your story is what sets you apart from your competitors. So, I want to give you an example. Our client Carlos, he provides a really amazing service for people who have tax debt with the IRS. There's a very limited number of service providers that are able to help you if you have a lot of tax debt. And he has an incredible personal story of being in tax debt and getting married and not telling his wife that he had all this tax debt. And then she now has the tax debt. Like, he really showcases his story. So he's not just some advisor that is selling a service that people are desperately in need of. He really leads with his story. And that's what has podcast audiences really trust him, because they're like, oh, Carlos gets the pain that I'm in with all this tax debt. And he has the knowledge and the expertise to help me get out of it. So leading with your story is what builds that trust. And it's what sets you apart from other people who provide the same service that you do. What Margie was talking about a moment ago, if you have a high ticket service or offering. So when you're getting interviewed on mid-tier podcasts, which is what the majority of us are being interviewed on, unless you're somebody that has, 100,000 plus Instagram followers and you're only going on like high top tier shows, most of us business owners are going on mid-tier podcasts, which means the audience size can be anywhere from, a couple hundred to several thousand listeners. These are niche, very targeted audiences. Now, you're going to have not necessarily thousands of people be reaching out to you after every single mid-tier podcast. But if you have a high ticket offering, like, let's say you're an agency and you have $100,000 contract, like that's how big your clients are. If you have one client that signs up with you from a year of podcast guesting, that's an amazing ROI. Plus, you have all the backlinks, you have all the content, you have all the network, like the relationships with the podcast hosts. But when you have a high ticket offering, you can get your full return on investment from podcast guesting with just one client. and the rest is just gravy. And we've had, a lot of our case studies. If you go to interviewconnections.com and click on the case studies, you'll see a lot of the case studies where it's like, made my ROI like with one client signing up. So high ticket is really key. And high ticket, everyone defines it differently. It could be a $2,500 course. You only need to sell maybe 10 of those, or it could be a $100,000 client. And then lastly, if you just need visibility because people are actively looking for what you do, they are looking for your service. All you need to do is get visible. Like one of our clients he's the CEO of a credit union and they do business loans. And people need business loans every day. They need business loans. That is something that most businesses come to a point where they're investing and they need a loan to get to the next level. So they are actively looking for that. Now, one can go to Google or their local bank and get a business loan, but it's like when there is an abundance of options for a service, that abundance of choices can often lead people to be frozen in indecision because there's so many options. How do you decide? So when you get on podcasts and you showcase your story, even though there's a million people that do what you do, suddenly you rise to the top because now they trust you. They got to spend all this time with you. So if people are looking for what you do and as long as you're visible, they're going to want to work with you, then just get on podcasts and be as visible as you can.
Love it. So let us know if you have questions. We're on Instagram at Interview Connections. If there's something that we didn't cover or you have a business and you're not sure which category it falls into, just send us a DM and let us know and we'll tell you. We'll be honest with you.
Absolutely. And I think, if you listen to this episode and you're seriously considering podcast guesting and you want to have an actual consultation call, like we can speak with you on a Zoom call. If you go to interviewconnections.com, there's a million different links where you can book a call. So you can book a consultation call and we can actually talk with you one-on-one and get your questions answered, see if this is the right fit for you and see if our program is the right fit for you. All right. Thanks for listening.